I've seen a lot of comments from people claiming that Dune Awakening is just going to be Conan Exiles reskin, and I want to put this statement to the test. What's up everybody, my name is Whack4863 and thank you for joining me for another video. I recently had a chance to play Dune Awakening during a content creator preview event, and I wanted to break down the similarities and the differences from Conan Exiles to Dune Awakening. Now if you want to see my spice-filled ride through the preview event, I've got that video already uploaded on my channel and I'll link it in the description of this video. Now as you may know, Conan Exiles was developed by Funcom, the same developer who's currently working on Dune Awakening. Now right off the bat, if you've played Conan Exiles or you've seen any content for Conan Exiles, you know there's a lot of sand in that game. Additionally, on our journey to Arrakis, we're going to see a lot of sand because it's a sand planet. So there's definitely an easy path to drawing a similarity between Conan Exiles and Dune Awakening simply because there's a lot of sand involved in both of these maps. And there's also a sandstorm that happens in each of these games, and from my experience, these sandstorms are very similar in both games, so there is a similarity there. But let's dive deeper into both of these maps and give you some understanding of how Dune Awakening's map is much different than Conan Exiles' map. After playing Dune Awakening during the preview event, it was very eye-opening to see how Funcom used the map to create height points. And even in the trailers that have been posted, we've seen where there are very low points to the map as well. All in all, the maps don't feel similar at all. The map in Dune Awakening definitely feels multi-leveled and multi-layered, where the Conan Exiles map after playing Dune Awakening feels very flat. Now some of that has to do with just the style of traversal and the differences between Conan Exiles traversal and Dune Awakening's traversal, but it also feels multi-layered because of the lack of loading screens when going into the open world dungeons, if you will, and heading underground, where Conan Exiles would put you through a loading screen in order to go into a dungeon, which in a way just kind of makes you feel disconnected from the fact that you're actually going underground. And from the content that I was able to play during the preview event, there were almost no loading screens. Wherever I went, I was able to just enter and exit without having to go through a loading screen. And this definitely made the map, or the sandbox if you will, feel more open and explorable than it does in Conan Exiles. Traversal across the map or inside this sandbox also feels a lot different than it does in Conan Exiles. For example, in Conan Exiles, if you want to get to the top of something, you are simply going to climb up there. However, in Dune Awakening, there's a lot of different possibilities or paths to get to a certain point. We all know that ornithopters will be a thing at some point in time in your gameplay, so you'll be able to simply fly up to that location. On top of that, there are traversal tools like the Shigawire Claw that allow you to grapple to different points. And then there's also suspensor belts that allow you to glide along, and you can use the Shigawire Claw along with the suspensor belt to really get a lot of height and a lot of speed. Traversal in, around, up, or down any specific area definitely feels different in Dune Awakening than it does in Conan Exiles. Many of the safe areas from the Sandworm actually have tunnels that go through them so that you can traverse through that tunnel to the other side very easily. Now those tunnels may be someone's home and you may have to deal with them on your way through it, but it can be a much quicker way to get to the other side of a rock outcropping than just going around it. Traversal can also feel more dangerous than it does in Conan Exiles because of the ever-looming Sandworm, or the Sardaukar ships that come out at night looking for some unsuspecting soul to trample on. And that brings me into progression. It feels different than Conan Exiles, although some of the systems do feel similar, and I'll get into that a little bit later on in this video. The progression is much different because Funcom has made it much harder for you to just run past certain content and objectives. You have to complete certain content and objectives to be able to go to, say, a northern part of the map and interact with the content there. Where in Conan Exiles, there aren't those blockers that stop your progression. Really, you can start directly from spawning in on the Broken Highway and run all the way up to the volcano or to the Frozen North and deal with content up there. That's not something you're really going to be able to do in Dune Awakening. Sure, you can fast track your progress to those areas, but you're still going to have to complete certain steps in order to be viable in those other areas. Dune Awakening has a journey system. Conan Exiles also has a journey system. However, they are nothing alike. The journey system in Dune Awakening is more like a story-driven ride through Arrakis, where the journey system in Conan Exiles feels more like a checklist of groceries that you need to pick up while you're out and about. Sure, there are journeys that are very similar to Conan Exiles where it's like build this, do that, go over here and learn this thing. But the big difference with the journey system in Dune Awakening is that it feels more like a story, and there actually is a story that is entwined with Dune Awakening. So as you're going and completing some of these journey steps, you're being fed a story along the way. And then other journey steps are also being completed while you're doing these different engagements. I'm sorry I'm being a little bit vague here, but I'm really trying to keep this video spoiler free. But bottom line is they don't feel similar at all. In fact, I would say that the phrasing or the terminology journey system in Dune Awakening really doesn't measure up to what that system actually is. A story that you're rewarded for following. Now this is a survival game, so there are daily things or gameplay loops that you're going to be doing every single day or on a regular basis, if nothing less. And that is going to make it feel a little bit like Conan Exiles. However, it really isn't like Conan Exiles as much as it's just a survival game, and certain aspects just have to be there. So for example, you're going to have to go out and farm or harvest certain things. You're going to go to your favorite POI and engage with that content, or you're going to go out and explore new areas looking for new and interesting resources or new and interesting POIs. All in all, your dailies are kind of going to look like any other survival game where you're looking for certain resources so that you can build that next item, or you're managing your water system, you're engaging with NPCs or different POIs in order to get the loot that they drop. So while we could draw similarities to Conan Exiles from the gameplay loops, we really could draw those same similarities to almost any other survival game that's currently on the market. One of the areas that I feel like Conan Exiles and Dune definitely feels similar is the loot system. Now there are variations in Dune Awakening from Conan Exiles' loot system, but essentially it kind of goes along the same lines. When you're defeating kind of these standard NPCs that are around the map, they're going to drop similar items. Now where this varies from Conan Exiles is there's a lot less items that are going to be dropped in inventories. You're not going to be overwhelmed or bombarded by random weird items in these NPC inventories. There are also chests to loot, and the chests have different items in there, anything from darts to healing items, and even legendaries. Yes, I call them legendaries, but they're actually called Imperial blueprints in the game. These are unique blueprints that you can use to craft unique items. This system does feel a little bit similar to Conan Exiles in the sense that you may be searching for these on a regular basis. Some of them are always going to be the same item when you unlock that chest, but many of these chests will have different items that can drop from that chest. So you may end up with 10 of an item, or you may end up with one of each item that can be dropped by that chest. So the RNG is there to force you to return to that location and engage with that content over and over again until you get the item drop that you want. I've only seen a fraction of the Imperial blueprints that are actually available in the game. There is a list that shows you what you've discovered and what you haven't discovered, But in my experience with these Imperial blueprints, they are very different from the legendaries that you would find, say, in Conan Exiles. A lot of them seem to have a plus side, but also a negative effect. So these are kind of chaotic in a way, if that makes sense. Not all of them are that way, but quite a few did seem to have a plus side and a negative side to using that item. So just because you find one of these Imperial blueprints, it does not mean that it's an automatic power up in the game. It may be as good as what you're using. It may actually be worse than what you're using, depending on what that negative is. For example, one of the items that I found said that it was a still suit, however it didn't function as an actual still suit. What it did was gave you more armor than the standard still suits would have. So, like I said, it's a positive and a negative. If you're someone that wants to have that water storage from a still suit, this wouldn't be a good fit for you. However, if you're someone that wants a bit more armor with the style of this still suit, this would definitely be something you'd want to wear. And these unique Imperial blueprints can be anything from a vehicle part to armor to a tool and even weapons. Speaking of weapons, they don't feel similar at all. You basically have ranged weapons and bladed weapons in Dune Awakening. There are no blunted weapons or anything like that. You have a knife, a sword, and then a handful of different types of ranged weapons. That's starkly different from the amount of different types of weapons that you have in Conan Exiles, from different types of swords, short swords, regular swords, long swords. Then you have the katana, you have hammers, you have all these different things in Conan Exiles where you just don't have that in Dune Awakening. There are a lot of different types of ranged weapons, but these aren't going to feel like Conan Exiles because the only ranged weapon you really have in Conan Exiles is a bow. Now let's talk about combat with these weapons and the differences between Dune Awakening and Conan Exiles. If I had to decide which one I like better, right now I'd say I like Dune Awakening's combat better than I like Conan Exiles combat. Although I do have a soft spot in my heart for Conan Exiles combat system. But the reason why I like the Dune Awakening combat system is it feels much more fluid. It actually feels faster than combat in Conan Exiles as well. And you know me, I love to go fast as I possibly can, unless I'm in a game that requires stealth. Then it's totally different. I like to be stealthy and quiet. Now, I wouldn't consider what Dune Awakening has to be stealth. There are times where you can kind of avoid being seen or heard from the enemy NPCs, but it's not what I would necessarily consider a stealth mechanic. It's more of a range mechanic where you stay out of sight and quiet until you get into a certain range, and then it seems like the AI just kind of kicks on and knows that you're there. A big difference in the combat in Dune Awakening to Conan Exiles is that your standard attacks are not going to cost any stamina, so you can shoot as many darts as you want without losing any stamina. You can swing your sword or your knife as much as you want without losing stamina. You can even run as much as you want without losing stamina. Your stamina really comes into play with your abilities, which are another thing that just aren't present in Conan Exiles. And the abilities are really a two-part system. You have to have the stamina to be able to execute said action, but you also have to have those things off of cooldown. So you can't just spam these abilities over and over again, causing you to have some set of strategy to approaching each engagement. Now, I know that many of you probably watched the live stream where Funcom showed the combat system. I'm here to tell you it is not as tedious as they made it look in that live stream. While you do want to have some forethought into the engagements that you walk into, you want to understand the NPCs and know their strengths and their weaknesses, you really don't have to be as tactical as they made it look in that preview. There may be scenarios that you get into where you start off with your ranged weapon, have to switch to your melee weapon, and in between all of your basic and standard attacks, you are weaving in your skills for the best possible outcome. Now let's talk about the skill tree. Essentially, you have skills, you have techniques, and then you have passives. Now you'll start the game with the ability to have 2 skills slotted at the same time, and then as you progress through the story, you'll unlock the ability to have a 3rd skill. These 3 skills are interchangeable between any of these skill trees that you actually have unlocked. This allows you to have some build diversity by using the different skills from different trainers or different skill trees. There are also techniques that can be unlocked, and you can have 3 different techniques equipped at any point in time. Most of these techniques are going to be defensive abilities, so these aren't necessarily abilities that you cast, but these are going to affect your defenses, and you can only have 3 of those at any point in time, again allowing you for a lot of different build diversity. And then you have the passive. These are the smaller nodes on your skill tree. These are going to give you minor buffs to different areas of your character progression as you level them up. So one may be more stamina or more stamina regeneration, where another one may give you more health. I think for the most part, we'll probably see a meta emerge for what the best passives are to unlock, and then we may or may not see a meta for what the best skills and what the best techniques are. To me, it feels like they built the skill system and the technique system to have a lot of counterplay, where you're not going to be able to unlock everything, and someone out there, if you're engaged in PvP, will likely be your counter and will deal more damage to you. However, you may also be their counter and you may deal more damage to them. All in all, the skill system in Dune Awakening is so much different than Conan Exiles that I haven't even mentioned Conan Exiles until this point. You will not see or be able to draw a comparison between the skills in Conan Exiles and the skills in Dune Awakening. Now, an area where you're definitely going to feel like Conan Exiles had some influence on Dune Awakening is in the crafting system and the crafting benches. There are an absolute ton of crafting benches in Dune Awakening similar to Conan Exiles, and then as far as crafting goes, it feels like any other crafting in survival games, with some cool features. I mean, it definitely presents itself in a very cool way. It's not like you have thralls banging a hammer on a bench or anything like that. In fact, there is no help from any outside source in Dune Awakening, so there isn't any NPC help. The animations on the different stations are very cool. It's very nice to look at. There's a hum that comes about your base as you kind of get production rolling. And there's no need to have resources in your inventory for crafting. It will search your storage and it will craft from the storage. I think this is absolutely necessary for Dune Awakening and any other survival games in the future. But the amount of benches that appear to be there just by looking at the knowledge system appears to be that we have come down the same road as Conan Exiles, where we continue to grow our base and add new, bigger benches to our base. Since we're talking about growing your base to accommodate all the different benches and the different size benches, let's talk a little bit about building. If I was to say anything about the building in Dune Awakening in comparison to Conan Exiles, I would say it's kind of like the 2.0 version of the construction hammer building in Conan Exiles. While I don't really feel like these building systems are similar because they function totally different and your UI totally changes when you're actually using the construction tool, you can definitely tell that they used a lot of what's good about the Conan Exiles building system in Dune Awakening, and they refined it so that it's even better. They stripped away a lot of the annoying things from the building system that is in Conan Exiles for the building system in Dune Awakening. One example of that is the stability system. While there is stability in Dune Awakening, it's stability light. So essentially you place down your subfief that claims an area for your building. Inside that area you can build however you want. You do have to have at least one item touching the ground, but then on top of that, you could basically build a completely floating base. I feel like this opens up the possibility to see a lot of different bases, a lot of different styles can be created because you're not hindered by stability. On top of that, and I know this is going to be a point of contention for some people, there are restrictions to how much building you can do. First of all, you have an area with your subfief that is claimed. You cannot build outside of that area. Each subfief is going to tell you how many building pieces you're allowed to use, how many decorations you're allowed to place, how much storage you're allowed to place, and how many production facilities you're allowed to place. Now, your subfief area can be expanded, so your build can be quite large and you can have quite a lot of these different items. But I know some of you are going to knee-jerk react at the fact that you are limited in the number of pieces you can place. However, I would say that this is an absolute must for Dune Awakening because we've seen what happens with Conan Exiles when you allow people to just build to their heart's content. You end up crashing servers and destroying server integrity. One of the greatest features about building in Dune Awakening is that you do not have to have the building supplies in your inventory. The construction tool will use any resource that is stored inside your subfief area. Let's dive into knowledge in Dune Awakening. It definitely feels similar to Conan Exiles. Essentially, you have different items on different pages that you can unlock as you progress through leveling up or progress through the story. There are also knowledge items that have to be discovered out in the world in order to unlock those. However, for the ones that I've seen and unlocked, I have been guided to, so I'm not sure that there's a lot outside of the Imperial blueprints that is going to be hard to find. And the progression for unlocking knowledge is kind of two parts. First of all, you have to have the knowledge points to spend on that specific item. But you may also have to progress the story to a certain point in order to unlock that item. Areas in the knowledge system that are going to vary from Conan Exiles. First, there is no level requirement to unlocking certain things because it's more of a story-based or story-driven game. When you reach the point where you can unlock those things, it's likely that you'll already be the level that you should be to be unlocking those things. Additionally, there is a system where you have to use a certain amount of knowledge points in order to unlock the next level. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get to a certain level to unlock those knowledge points, because you can find knowledge points out in the open world at different POIs when you're exploring them. However, it is kind of a barrier to allowing you to get to things before you're the level that you should be in order to engage with that area. So some areas of the knowledge system definitely feel like they are similar to Conan Exiles, other areas definitely feel different. Let's dive into leveling in Dune Awakening. Now, this essentially is going to feel a lot like a lot of games, not necessarily Conan Exiles, but essentially how you level up is by just interacting with content. So there's no system for gaining experience just for being in the game in Dune Awakening. However, different actions are going to give you varying amounts of experience. So when you're harvesting, you'll get experience. When you first discover a location, you're going to get experience. Also, when you are engaging in defeating enemies, you'll get experience for that as well. Now, I do think that people that have played Conan Exiles will definitely see similarities in the leveling system in Dune Awakening. However, the systems that are in Dune Awakening are kind of just an industry-wide standard. When you do X action, you receive X experience for doing that action. Now, with all that being said, I suppose it's time for my final thoughts. People that want to see a similarity in comparison with Conan Exiles and Dune Awakening are certainly going to see that in some of the systems that are in the game. However, I would say it is definitely not a reskin of Conan Exiles. Funcom certainly took some inspiration and some learnings from Conan Exiles, and they implemented those things into Dune Awakening in varying different manners. All in all, I think if you enjoyed playing Conan Exiles, you'll enjoy playing Dune Awakening. But Dune Awakening is such a different game that you're not going to feel like you're playing a different version, or a reskinned version for that matter, of Conan Exiles. If you're into survival sandbox games, this is a game that you should definitely check out. I also think that if you're into story-driven games, Dune Awakening may be a good starting point to check out a sandbox survival game. As someone who's played quite a few survival games, I would consider Dune Awakening on the light side of survival, since you're really just managing water. You're not managing calories or any kind of food in order to survive, and we see a lot of that in some of these other survival games. I'll have more videos on my channel about Dune Awakening in the upcoming weeks, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Additionally, I'd like to know if you think I missed any key points where I should have compared Dune Awakening with Conan Exiles. I'd like to thank all my YouTube members for your continued support. Y'all are absolute legends. Don't be out of whack, there's another video on the screen that you can watch to support more of my content.